Okay, so this is Shiur number 4, and we are on a new chapter of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. This is chapter 2. I don't know if you should call them chapters because they're really like, I guess, entries. And we read it last time, but we did not discuss it at all. Okay, so for those who are new here, we're going to read 3 translations, and then I have like this little table where we can compare them bit by bit, and then we'll raise all the questions on it and then try to answer questions and just see where our discussion takes us. Okay, here we go. All right, so the first one is the George Long translation from 1862. Whatever this is that I am, it is a little flesh and breath and the ruling part. Throw away thy books, no longer distract thyself. It is not allowed. But as if thou wast now dying, despise the flesh. It is blood and bones and a network, a contexture of nerves, veins, and arteries. See the breath also, what kind of a thing it is. Air, and not always the same, but every moment sent out and again sucked in. The third then is the ruling part. Consider thus, thou art an old man. No longer let this be a slave. No longer be pulled by the strings like a puppet to unsocial movements. No longer either be dissatisfied with thy present lot or shrink from the future. So that's translation 1. Translation 2 from A.S.L. Farquharson. This, whatever it is that I am, is flesh and vital spirit and the governing self. Disdain the flesh, blood and bones and network, a twisted... Oh no, I looked this up. I looked up how to pronounce this. Skein, maybe I got it wrong again. A twisted skein of nerves, veins, and arteries. Consider also what the vital spirit is, a current of air, not even continuously the same, but every hour being expelled and sucked in again. There is then a third part, the governing self. Put away your books, be distracted no longer. They are not your portion. Rather, as if on the point of death, reflect like this. You are an old man. Suffer this governing part of you no longer to be in bondage, no longer to be a puppet pulled by selfish impulse, no longer to be indignant with what is allotted in the present, or to suspect what is allotted in the future. And then 3, this is my favorite translation just in general. He's just the most modern. This thing that I am, whatever we are to call it, is flesh, spirit, and the command center. Forget your books and don't let it upset you. That's not allowed. Indeed, as one on the point of death, despise the flesh. It's just blood, bones, and a network of nerves, veins, and arteries. Then consider what spirit is, no more than air and never constant, continually belched out and gulped back in. So that leaves the third ingredient, the command center. Look at it this way. You're elderly, put an end to allowing its enslavement, put an end to being tugged here and there like a puppet at the prompting of selfish impulses, put an end to both complaining about your present fate and shrinking from the future. And then just one factual note here from Robin Waterfield. The footnote guy, well, I guess Waterfield is his name. He says, on forget your books, don't let it upset you. That's not allowed. This notebook was very likely written out on campaign. So he was going to war. He was in war for a lot of his reign. So he like literally didn't have his books. Marcus did not have his complete library to hand, and he was obviously missing it. But its lack enabled him to focus in true Stoic fashion on being virtuous rather than on being learned. Disparagement of book learning is an especially prominent theme in Epictetus's discourses. So you can kind of ignore that last part. I just wanted to give this fact that like when he's saying forget your books, don't treat that as purely like an ideal. He literally didn't have his books, and he had like he was sad. So he was saying, forget about your books right now. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy and paste these translations into the chat so that you have all of them, and then we will do what we usually do, which is to raise questions and then see where our analysis takes us. So we got 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and I'm going to leave translation 3 on the screen while we have questions here, but I'll move up and down with the table here. Okay, so what are the questions and problems? Yeah, Shmuel.
So my problem with this, and I guess it can also be a question, is does he expect us to live as if we're old people? Like, is that really a ideal way of going through the world
Okay.
as if like an old man?
Okay, good question. So I'm going to actually restate a factual premise and then split your question into 2. Okay, so the factual premise is that I think I mentioned this in the first year, but I don't think we talked about it last time. So he wrote this purely for himself, and he was not expecting this to be published. So he was talking to himself as though he were an actual old man because he was an old man. So the question is, I'm going to split this into 2 questions. So one question is what was his point in emphasizing his old age? And actually, I'll put this as one question, but it's really of what relevance is this to us if we are not old? Okay. And just, I actually don't know this. I just want to see how old he was when he died. Marcus Aurelius. So he was 58 when he died. So those of you who are in your 50s, he's calling himself an old man, you know. So yeah, I don't know. I can't remember actually. Let me just check what year he wrote this in. Hold on just 1 second. He wrote this in the year I don't know. Oh, so it says, hold on, around year 170-ish something. So this is like, I mean, he was close to his end of his life. So he was in his 50s, right? Okay. So the question is like, yeah. So the question is of what relevance is this to us? Like, in other words, you know, would those of us who are young, you know, not have to take this point into consideration as much? Okay. So is that an acceptable treatment of your question, Shmuel?
Yeah, I guess it's a less chutzpahdik way of putting it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, it's not a matter of chutzpah. It's just like he was talking to himself saying you are old, but we as the readers who are like sneaking to his diary, you know, have to ask, like, is that relevant to us also who are not old? Okay, Rachel.
How is he suggesting we view our physical bodies
Yeah.
in relation to the ruling, like the
Okay. So
rational.
let's just make this, I'm going to state it as the broadest question possible, and then I'll narrow in, which is, you know, what, you know, how is he suggesting we view our flesh and spirit in relation to the command center? Okay. And, you know, just to make this easier, because I'm a very visual person here, let's color code these things. Okay. So we got flesh, we've got spirit, and then we've got the command center. Okay. And then let's just color code what he says about each of these things. Okay. So he says, despise the flesh. It's just blood, bones, and network of blah, blah, blahs. Okay. So that is the flesh. Then the spirit, which is a column of air that's gulped in and belched out. And then the command center. Right. So he clearly, if you ask him, hey, Marcus, what's your favorite part? You know, he's very clear about what his favorite part is. Okay. But the question is, how is he viewing the other parts? And he says, despise the flesh, you know? So like, I'll add that to you here. You know, what does it mean to despise the flesh and why? Okay. And also I'll add on to this, why, are we also supposed to despise the spirit? Okay, I know those are like many questions. Okay, maybe we'll have others included in this. Yeah, Tamar.
What's the relationship between the way that he's like breaking things down? 1 second. The way he's breaking things down and sort of the imperative at the end, it sort of seems like maybe that's I guess my question is kind of like the thing that he's telling you to do based on the command center.
Yeah.
Whatever exactly that is, you know?
Yeah.
How that relates to, or does it relate to the breakdown into the 3 parts?
Okay. All right. So I have a feeling that this is a question that we're going to ask on every chapter, but some it's going to be less obvious than others, and this is less obvious. So the question is going to be, what is the unity and flow of his entire argument? So specifically, what is the relationship between his statements about the 3 parts and his like injunction at the end about I guess it's just his injunction at the end. We'll just lump it into one category. Is that your question? Like, what's the connection here? Okay, all right, good. Yeah, Isaiah.
I guess this is similar. Maybe it's the same question. But like so he says at the end to put an end to being tugged here, put an end to complaining. So what does he mean for you to put in its place instead of those things? What does he mean to have happen in your command center as opposed to those?
That's a good question also, right? So I'm gonna just put this beforehand. Okay, so what exactly is he suggesting is the ideal for our command center? Yeah, and what I'm saying, put an end to the logins and let put an end to being tucked here and there, like right. Okay, yeah. All right. So what is his ideal here? Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, Michael.
He says that we should like disdain the spirit because it's no more than air and it's not constant. But then
Yeah.
he's also reminding us that we're elderly, which is seemingly saying that we're the same way. So what exactly is the difference between us and the air? And that neither of
Okay.
us are constant, it seems.
That's interesting. Okay, so I actually am going to convert this into a question about his statement about the spirit, okay, and then extend it to the self. So the question is, what exactly is his argument about the spirit? What about the fact that it's, air, which is never constant, and being gulped, I guess belched out and gulped in. What is it about the fact that it's air, which what is it about the fact, okay, that makes it, bad in some way? And then how is this inconstancy of the spirit to be I guess how are we to view our own inconstancy in light of this property of the spirit? Okay, so was that your question about how the spirit is like this not constant thing, and then the self is also okay? All right, good. Yeah, Reza.
It kind of seems like he's glamorizing or romanticizing viewing the world through the lens of old age, but I would argue that there's also value in seeing the world with like a lens of youth and questioning, and especially like the intergenerational like conversations and back and forth that can happen through there. So I wouldn't say that like seeing the world with the knowledge of an old person is like the best and only way. Like there's value in the back and forth between.
So that's interesting, because I took him as saying a negative thing about old age, right? Because I thought he was saying, and maybe I got that from another translation. Let me just compare these. So we have for the old age part, well, I was primed to think this way, because he says, consider it as though you are now dying. And then he says, consider thus you're an old man, you're elderly. And it's like the tone I get here is like, you've been enslaved for your whole life. So like, get your act together. You're already old. So that unless anyone wants to make a counter argument, I do think he's chastising himself for saying like, you're so old, like get it together, stop being a puppet. You see what I'm saying?
I do see that. I took it as if he finally reached this like point of knowledge with all his life experience. Like, now I'm finally free since I'm old and I like don't.
Right. So I think he's saying the opposite. He's saying it's about time you free yourself because you're old, But I think either way, this is going to be folded into Shmuel's question, which I'll just tack this on here, which is like, what is his attitude towards old age as opposed to youth? Okay, that I think we'll cover it, a combination of both those questions. Yeah, David?
Okay, we each have a question.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so mine is following Isaiah's question.
Yeah.
Isaiah's asking what's the ideal for our command center. When he's talking about, he says, put an end to its enslavement and put an end to it being tugged.
Yeah.
Is he saying that is the being tugged an elaboration of what the enslavement is, or is the enslavement that our command center is under, is that something different than being tugged here and there by selfish impulses?
Okay, so good question here. So let's say here, okay, so let's say, what is the nature of this enslavement and its relation to the puppet analogy? Okay, and speaking of the puppet analogy, I actually meant to type this footnote out. I just want to read one more thing in case I don't know what kind of puppet you're picturing here, but Waterfield says Marcus liked the puppet analogy and used it in several other places: 3:16, 6:16, 6:28, 7:3, 7:29, 10:38, and 12:19. Okay, I didn't want to like copy and paste all those. He was probably thinking not so much of the kind of puppet that dangles from strings and is manipulated by a human agent, as of the kind popular in his day that goes through its motions after being wound up, with its strings pulled by, for example, falling weights. In other words, his point is that it is a thoughtless, mechanical kind of action. Okay, so we're not talking puppet as you have complete control over it, or like you have complete control over it. We're talking about a like automaton, that you wind it up and go. Or for those of you who I don't know, those of you who are in my Machshavah Shiur, but when I use the symbol monkey, the wind up monkey that claps the cymbals and just keeps going. Okay, so that's the puppet we're talking about. So the question is, what is the enslavement and its relation to the puppet analogy? Is this 2 points or 1 point and an analogy to clarify? And like, what does it mean to be tugged here and there that way? Okay, and Tara, you also had a question?
Yeah, so kind of in the similar place, I'm trying to, oh, he has to scroll down, sorry. So where I felt like I was not entirely clear. We're making the assumption, I think, that it refers to the command center, but
good question.
I was kind of seeing it as possibly the flesh as well.
Okay, right. Okay, good question also. So let's say here, 1 L or 2 L's? 2? Okay. Okay, so what is the it that is being enslaved? Is it the command center or the the flesh and spirit? Okay, and that's going to be a central question, right? Because that's kind of the focal point of his command to himself. So we're going to have to answer that. Okay, Esti.
Okay, this is, I probably should have asked this before. I don't actually understand what he's saying here at all. Like, I mean, I wanted to just make sure that I am understanding. He's saying flesh, spirit, and command center. Okay, flesh I understand to be physical. Spirit, what is he referring to?
Okay, so spirit seems to be the breath. Okay, and I don't know exactly. I don't know exactly what they thought the breath was, but it seems to be that you could substitute spirit with like life force, like the thing that keeps you alive. Like so there's like the body, and then there's like the energy source of the body. I don't know if that's the best analogy, but the thing that keeps it going. And I'm assuming this because like, when you die, you stop breathing. So like breath is associated with continuing life.
Okay, and then command center is that which can choose.
Right.
Your choosing faculty.
The choosing faculty, correct? Yeah.
Okay, so then, okay, I got the next few sentences, and at the very end, what he's telling himself is that throughout his life, his command center has been enslaved, and he is now at this point desiring. I'm asking. This is a question.
Yeah.
He wants to stop having his command center being, like you said, like a puppet, like being compelled by things that happened beforehand, like wound up and then set on a course. And he wants to be able to choose what his fate is and what his future is using his command center.
Okay, so I think that gets, that's one possibility, okay? But I think this is what Tara was asking about, which is put an end to its enslavement. So you're reading it, Esti, as that's the last antecedent of this pronoun, which is the command center, right? Look at it this way. Your elderly put an end to its enslavement, to the enslavement of the command center, and then he's somehow saying that that's going to somehow connect it to like stop. I guess if you do this, then you'll stop complaining about your present and shrinking from the future, or in order to stop the enslavement, that you should stop complaining about your present state and shrinking from the future. So that's like one reading, that the its is the command center, which is how I read it. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe even less than that. Just he's giving himself a command about something. I just want to make sure that I'm reading the paragraph. I found the grammar very difficult.
He's giving himself a pep talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. I'm gonna go ahead and snatch a question here, which is obviously all of this is included in tomorrow's question, but I'm gonna say here, what is he saying about stop complaining and stop shrinking from the future? Okay, so I'll say, is this merely an example of being puppeted with one T, or is puppeted even a word? Apparently not, but whatever, it's a word now. Is this an example of being puppeted, or is this a separate step that he has to take in order to seize control of his command center? Or is this a result of what happens when he seizes control of his command center? in other words, and again, this is part of Mark's question, how does this fit into his argument? Yeah. Okay. Michael.
So at the beginning, when he says this thing that I am, whatever we are to call it, like what exactly is his sense of self here? Because he's saying like especially if he's older, he sounds like he's like a stranger in his own body, which seems odd if he's so old.
Okay. All right. So this will also be a central question here. What is his sense of self? Okay, and what do we make of his, his I guess his aside of whatever we are to call it. And let me just actually see what the other translations say. Whatever this is that I am, this whatever it is that I am, this thing that I am, whatever we are to call it. Is how familiar is he with himself? Why speak of himself in such uncertain terms? Yeah. And look, again, this is, I'm going to keep on emphasizing this here. This is not like the other learning that we do, right? So when we learn Mishlei or Tehillim, then we have, Shlomo or David who are writing this in formulated language for posterity, right? And they're making deliberate choices in what they write. And so they're doing this to convey ideas. We really don't know whether, if I took your journal and scrutinized it and, inferred things from every turn of the phrase, then you might get mad at me, not just for stealing your journal, but for reading stuff into it. So we don't know if he's saying this as like some essential idea, or if he's just like, whatever this thing is that I am, So it's a good question, but we have to decide how much to read into it, and be wary about that. Okay, Shmuel.
I'm really stuck on this whole idea of being elderly and death.
Okay.
So what it seems to me that he's saying is that himself, who he feels like he's on his deathbed because he's older, that in principle one should be as if they're on their deathbed, where at that point nothing else really matters because you're about to die, and live life in that sort of objective way. And maybe I'm wrong because we were talking about this. Raisa was saying how it seems like he's romanticizing death, and I actually agree.
Okay. Wow, that's two.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. All right. So let's just ask this question. Where we're going to put this one? Where does he say this? As on the point of death, before the despise the flesh. All right. So let's say this here. Let's just say, what is his attitude towards death and its relation to his specific old age? Okay, and how does his, I guess what, I guess, why does he deem it necessary to urge himself to view this whole topic as though he is on the point of death? What would happen if he considered all of these ideas but didn't think about his mortality? Okay, so I think that'll cover it. Yeah.
I guess one more thing to add to that would be how is death more freeing or old age more freeing than youth? Because a lot of people say that youth is the most free.
So again, I don't agree with that reading. I think he's saying that you have okay, let me put it this way. I agree with that idea, which I can explain when we go into the ideas, but I don't agree with that reading of what he's saying. It sounds like he's saying you ought to be more freed when you're because you're so old. Like, I guess it does come down to your question. Okay, I see it now. So let me write that down. Where is, so I'll say furthermore, what is the basis for his implication that someone in their old age ought to be freer than someone in their youth? Right? Because he is such that he urges himself, get your act together, old man. Yeah. Okay, good. Side point, by the way, I don't know if this matters, but just another fact thrown here when he says on the point of death and old age, Marcus Aurelius was sick for his entire life. He had really, really bad asthma. Let's do a trivia thing. Anyone know who his doctor was? Yeah, Michael?
Galen?
Galen, okay, the inventor of medicine, of Western medicine. Okay, so he had arguably the best physician in the world, but he was like very, very sickly for his whole life. And I don't know if he was like sick of the thing that killed him at this point, but yeah, again, I don't know if that matters for our ideas. But yeah, okay, Isaiah.
Yeah. So my question, like, what's the deal with his tone in this paragraph? I feel like
Good
his
question
tone
also.
is a little angry, a little bit like self.
Yeah.
Like angry at himself, and like, is that productive? Is that like, I guess I have a few questions about, like, is that what's the word, like an example of how the Stoics usually are? Is that like a Stoic way to be, and is that like a productive way to be?
Okay, good. Great formulation of the question. So it sounds angry, bitter, and harsh. And I'm going to say, especially compared to his previous paragraph, which sounded like magnanimous and patient and empathetic. So the question is, why, I guess, to what extent does the tone affect our relationship with the ideas, and then to what extent can we universalize this as a general approach to life? Okay, I'm gonna give an example, by the way, just because it's a fun example. Let me see if I can find it here.
Were these consecutive paragraphs in his journal, like it was one, and this was the next entry?
Yeah, so we don't. Yeah, it's the next entry, but we don't know how far apart these entries were. So, presumably it's a different day, because presumably he would write all of it in one at one time. But yeah, it's a different entry. Okay, what am I looking up? Mucus? How do you spell mucus? Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so this is a Stoic technique. Oh look, it's meditation 613. Okay, so that's how we'll remember it. So he says, so I'll repeat it first, and I'll comment. When we have meat before us and other food, we must say to ourselves, "This is the dead body of a fish, and this is the dead body of a bird or a pig." And again, this Falernian wine, which I guess was a fancy wine, is only a little grape juice. And this purple robe, some sheep's wool dyed with the blood of a shellfish. And in matters of sexual intercourse, that it is an attrition of an entrail and a convulsive expulsion of mere mucus. Okay, so he's just trying to describe like the sexual mechanics in a very, very like a very, very blunt way. Surely these are excellent imaginations, going to the heart of actual facts and penetrating them so as to see the kind of things they really are. This is how we should act through life. Where there are things that seem worthy of great estimation, we ought to lay them bare and look at their worthlessness and strip them of all the words by which they are exalted. For the outward show of things is a wonderful perverter of reason. And when we are certain that the things that we are dealing with are worth the trouble, that is when it cheats us the most. So this is a technique. I don't know what the Latin term for this is, but like expressions of contempt that the Stoics use, where if you get very, very caught up, let's say like in this like exotic like a fish dish that you're eating, you're saying, I'm munching on a dead aquatic creature, or I had an episode of the Stoic Jew Podcast where I was like something about like I was let's say coffee, like get very into coffee. This is a hot bean water, and so what you do is you state the thing in very like harsh, contemptuous, factual terms, and it breaks your attachment to them. So that is an example of potentially what he's doing here, that with his tone. Like, is he using, is he I guess, like, let me add this to this question here. So is he artificially taking this tone in order to cultivate a certain mentality, or is this tone the result of how he naturally views the flesh and spirit. And either way, who cares? What does it matter? Okay, great question.
What does what matter?
What does his tone matter? What does his tone matter for us, for the ideas? Okay. Yeah, David.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe going exactly with that, I've been wondering about when he says that that's not allowed.
Yeah.
So is that like, again, within his tone, that this is just like an overall, like, this is like something that you would truly think, but don't let yourself go there, or that is just like, yeah, this thing isn't actually important, and this is just his harsh way of saying it? Or is there like actual, he does acknowledge and heed to the fact that this is something that one wants and gravitates toward?
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead, since no one's asked this yet, I'm gonna go ahead and just ask this basic question, which is okay, I'll ask this as my question, which is what is his argument or idea about his books? How does this fit in? Okay, and then David's question is, what does he mean when he tells himself this is not allowed? Okay, how is that supposed to affect him? And what it reminds me of, and I know I've quoted this, I don't think I've quoted this in a long time, but there's a Mad TV sketch, which is a way too long sketch, about this therapist, and like the client comes in as a new client, and he says, she says like, oh, I've heard that you have like this method for like curing any psychological ailment and any relationship problem, or like mental illness or depression or whatever. And he says, yes, and so she says, and you charge like only like $15 an hour or something like that. And he says, yeah. And she says, is that really possible? He says, yeah. And he's like being all humble about it. And she says, okay, I'll take it. And he says, you sure you want the treatment? And she says, yeah. So he says, okay, so I want you to listen to me very carefully. You have this depression. Listen to my words. Stop it. And he says, just stop, and the whole skit, and they do this way too much, is just like, that's his method to like solving any psychological illness. He just yells at them, stop it, and so it sounds like that's kind of what Marcus is telling himself, like, oh, you're attached to your books, just stop, not allowed, and is that really effective? I don't really think so, so how's that supposed to affect things? Yeah.
Can I ask
one
other follow-up question to the point of the books also? So I mean, so far as like the books themselves, obviously they're not of importance, but if the books are going to help him with clarity of thought, then isn't that thing that shouldn't be just fine to lose?
Aren't his books helpful? Why disdain them? Yeah. Okay, good. And again, this is where like you have to understand. I know I've brought in two facts about his biography here. In general, and this is not just about Stoicism, but like the great books in general. In general, when you're learning stuff, like, I am a big believer in taking the words at their face value, especially if someone was writing for generations, and like assuming that this book is taking on an independent life, but here, like, he was writing this for himself. So like, so I don't know. So then this is the part of the question is like, how much is this just him telling himself this when he's on war campaign? And like, that's very important. And how much of this is in general? For example, there is another passage in, hold on. Yeah, in 10:6, stop talking about what the good man is like and just be one. Okay, which is one of I think that's one of Harry Truman's favorite statements. So that is emphasizing like there is such a thing as being too caught up in the theoretics. Like, stop just like discussing and learning all this book learning. Just be virtuous. So maybe this stems from that. Okay, so we it could be either one. Yeah, Michael.
Where's my question? Yeah. So what is he saying at the what is he saying at the very end about like putting an end to both complaining about your present fate and shrinking from the future? Like, how exactly is that related to what he was saying before?
Yeah, I think, did I write that question down?
Oh, I see it. Yeah, it was number 12. Sorry.
12. All right, thanks. Yeah. All right. Yeah, Tamar.
Sorry, it took a second to mute.
Sure.
Oh yeah, my question was about the flesh. I think there's already a question about the flesh, but I wanted to add to it. Which is when he says it's just blood, bones, a network of nerves, veins, and arteries. Why is that a reason to despise the flesh?
Right. Okay, good. So I'm putting this here. Why is the fact that it is just nerves, veins, and what is it? Nerves, veins, and arteries? Yeah, and arteries. A reason to despise the flesh. Yeah. And that might also play into Isaiah's tone question. Yeah. Esti?
Back to David's question.
Yeah.
And also a little bit your question about the books. Is he grouping that into flesh? Because he says, forget your books, don't let it say it's not that indeed. Like, is this part of flesh?
Right.
Books?
Good question. Now here's a weird thing. Just 1 second. Yeah, so I don't get this. I don't think there are lots of manuscripts of this. I don't think there are any manuscripts of this, but I noticed that in the long translation and in the Waterfield translation, forget your books is the second sentence, but in the Farquharson translation, forget your books is at the end. Put away or not at the end, in the middle. Put away your books, be distracted no longer. They're not your portion. So I don't know what to make of that. Like maybe there are two versions of the text, and so what I'm going to do, just because I don't know, is let's treat this as the place of this statement is not important. Okay, I think it is a good question if the place were important, but let's just treat it as though we don't know where the sentence is supposed to go.
But in any case, then, I mean, he's talking about himself being, right, these three things.
Yeah.
The three parts. What do books have to do with it altogether?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
So I will attack onto my question, which is what. Oh, I did say this. How does this fit in? How does this fit in with the theme of the entry, which seems to be about his self-conception and how he should view his flesh and spirit? I think that'll cover it. Yeah, Reza?
The line about the spirit, he says, consider it's no more than air and never constant, always changing. I'm wondering if he is being influenced by any worldview or his own training, because I feel like I hear that the spirit is the constant thing a lot of the time. So I saw in the other translation, he says the breath, he interchanges spirit and breath. So maybe it's just like a matter of translation.
Yeah. So I was going to comment on that, and I will now, which is that in Hebrew, I feel like we talked about this in the Mishlei Shiur like earlier this summer, but I'm gonna say it again anyway. So in Hebrew, we have basically three words for soul: nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Okay, and nefesh means to breathe. Okay, I guess to breathe. Ruach is like wind or air, and neshama is also breath. And I believe. I was taught this in graduate school, and I haven't verified it, but this is a guy who was obsessed with etymology. So he said psyche comes from the word psyche, which means breath. Let's just see if this is true. Etymology of psyche. Yeah, breath, life, or soul. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just assume that this is just talking about the life force, and that they recognize on an experiential level that when you're alive, you're breathing, and when you're dead, then you stop breathing. And there's also like isn't there a thing like when you die, like there's a certain like death rattle, or like a breath that like your body like just lets out the air. So like that might also have been taken as like a letting out of the spirit. So we'll just assume that this is talking about like spirit is just another synonym for like breath, and that's just referring to like your biological life. I think that'll be simpler. Yeah. Okay. David or Terrell?
So David helped me to formulate this a bit, but I was kind of struggling with why he was focusing, like it feels like this whole paragraph is about trying to convince himself that the books are not important. So why is he spending so much time talking about what is not important instead of talking about what is important?
Okay, that's a good question. Okay, so where do I want to put this question? I'm gonna actually put this at the near tomorrow's question, because this is a macro question here, which is why spend so much time talking about what is not important as opposed to what is important? And this kind of, again, I'm going to repeat what I said last time. In general, when we're learning, we got to be careful to not, I'm saying this for myself, we got to not expect the author to answer, to state his entire life philosophy in like one paragraph, especially if this is at the beginning of the book, and especially if this is not a book that we were meant to read, So like, so we have to, balance this with, maybe he's talking so negatively because he needed to hear it, but this does connect to what we talked about last time, which is, what is his positive vision for what he should do with his life and what he should do with his command center? We listed this question somewhere also, so I think this kind of goes hand in hand. Like, in other words, why not give equal airtime to talking about positive uses of his command center? Yeah, so it's a good question, but again, we will just have to keep in mind, like, maybe he just really needed to hear this day because it's his journal. Yeah, Michael.
So this is similar to my first question about like what his sense of self is.
Yeah.
Is that like I said, it seems like he's almost unfamiliar with himself, but then he seems to know what he is to the extent he knows his three parts, I guess.
Yeah.
And so that's like similar to that question. And then furthermore, is he equally these three parts, or is he, by the end, is he saying that he identifies with his command center more than like his flesh, or is he saying, no, I'm equally all three parts? Okay,
good question. Okay, so how familiar is he with himself? Why is he speaking in such uncertain terms? Given that he does seem to know his parts. And then at the end, I'm going to actually put this as a macro question as well, which is, how does his sense of self evolve from the beginning to the end? Yeah. Okay. Well, I feel like we got a lot of questions. I don't know if we got all of them. Let's just look through one more time. Well, we didn't ask a big question, which is, what is his view of the command center? Okay, like what does this refer to? Okay, and again, I'm not saying that we're necessarily going to answer that here, but I think we have to ask it. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do what we do. Yeah, Esty.
Just from what you were saying before, I mean, I feel like there's a similarity between this and the first entry in his diary of, like, he's kind of, looking at himself, looking at his impulses, looking at what he's doing, and like telling himself, like you gotta do better than this. You can do better than this, right?
Right.
But it sounded like that's not what you were just saying.
Well, that's definitely the thrust of what he's saying, right? But it does seem like he's trying to dissuade himself from falling into a particular way of viewing himself and a particular way of acting, right? So that's, I think, what we need to try to figure out. Unless I missed your comment or your question.
No.
Okay.
I'm just gonna listen.
Michael?
This is similar to the question you just asked about his view of the command center.
Yeah.
But just to maybe elaborate on it, is he says, like, so that leaves us with the command center. So is he saying, like, we have nothing else that's valuable, so we may as well just go with the command center? Or is there something like that actually actively puts it above the rest? Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to put that in the question about how is he suggesting we view our flesh and spirit in relation to the command center? What is implied by, that leaves the command center? Yeah, I'll just leave it as a general question. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy and paste all the questions into the chat so you have all of them. Oh, I can't. Okay, this is going to take forever to copy and paste them, but we'll take forever if we have to. We learned our lesson in our first shiur when we tried to thoroughly go through and answer all the questions, and we learned that that's impossible. So what I'm going to suggest is that, in a little while, we're going to take our thinking minute and just think about this. And I think it'll be most productive if we try to if we all try to think about the question, what's the main idea, or what's your main takeaway from here? And we'll use that as a point of discussion. Okay, that'll be the game plan. Give me 1 second. I'm still pasting the questions for those who aren't familiar. Zoom resets all the outline numbers, and because I'm neurotic, I have to like change all of the outline numbers back to the correct numbers. Okay, we're almost done here. Oh no, we're not almost done. Okay, hold on just a second. Hopefully you have plenty to think about while we're waiting. 13, 14. Yeah, Lauren?
You may have said this earlier, but what is spirit? Like, what's the difference between flesh and spirit?
Yeah,
You
so
answer that.
flesh seems to be the physical stuff that your body is made of, and spirit is the breath that animates the spirit and gives it life.
I guess
and
I'm
it also seems
confused
like he
with-
would say
yeah.
that spirit is not part of you. It's like what you take in and expel.
Oh, so it's something, is it like something that's like part of the body? Because I feel like I'm thinking that the command center is the mind.
Yeah, the command center. Well, the command center is definitely not physical, or it seems to be not physical. And you know, I wasn't sure if I was going to do this, but let me just quickly go to the Rambam really quickly in just to I put this here. Okay, so we also went over this in Mishlei earlier this summer, but I'm going to read it again. This is among the most perplexing Rambams in the Mishnah Torah. This is where he defines what the soul is and what the soul is not. So I just want to read it because this is the Stoic Jew Shiur, so we want to have some some basis in Judaism here. So the Rambam says, and we're not going to dwell on this, I just want this as a frame of reference, and I'm doing this to answer Lauren's question. So he says, so he's going to first of all introduce us to the most complicated concept of form and matter. You can never see material without a form or form without a material. Rather, it is the human mind that divides the existent body and knows that it is comprised of material and form, and knows that there exist bodies whose material is comprised of the 4 elements, and bodies whose materials are elementary and not comprised of any other materials, and that the forms which lack material are not visible to the eye, but are known by the mind's eye in the same way that we know the Lord of all without seeing of the eye. Okay, now, if you are familiar with Aristotle's doctrine of hylomorphism, of like form and matter, thumbs up. If you're not familiar, forget about it. That should be its own complete like class, and like I can send you a YouTube video of it if you're interested. This is just a setup for us for the next paragraph. The nefesh, okay, the soul, and using the word nefesh for soul, of all flesh is the form that God gave it. Okay, that which gives it, we'll define form for now as that which gives the thing unity and makes it what it is. Okay, so the nefesh of all flesh is the form that God gives it. So God gave it. So for example, if you have a dog, so we'll call it the dog's dogness. Okay, and there's a funny thing about a dog is that if the dog dies, the difference between a living dog and a dead dog is that when the dog dies, it decomposes and breaks down into material stuff. Or if a dog eats dog food, the dog food is metabolized and becomes dog, so it's taking that matter is being transformed into dog. Okay, so the form, that dogness that gives the dog unity and continued existence throughout time and in space, that's its form. Okay, so that's the nefesh of all flesh. And then here comes the most confusing sentence in the entire Mishnah Torah. V'hadas hayesera hametsuya b'nafsho shel adam hi tzuras ha'adam hashalom b'dato. The superior knowledge found in the human nefesh is the form of the man who is perfect in his knowledge. Shrug. Concerning this form, the Torah said, let us make man in our form, okay, tselem, like our likeness. Okay, that's the definition of man in Bereshis, in Genesis. This means that that man should have a form that knows and apprehends immaterial concepts, okay, non-physical ideas, such that it comes to resemble them. This pasuk, this verse, was not said in reference to the visible form of man, namely his mouth, his nose, his cheeks, and the rest of his anatomy, for this is called toar, appearance. Nor was this said in reference to the nefesh found in all living things, whereby they eat, drink, reproduce, feel, and muse. Rather, it is the dea, the knowledge, which is the form of the nefesh, and it is the form of the nefesh which the Torah speaks about. In many cases, this form is called nefesh or ruach. Therefore, you must be careful with the terminology so as to not make a mistake, and each and every instance of the term should be learned from its context. This form of the nefesh of the human being is not made up of the physical elements such that it will decompose into them, nor does it exist by virtue of the neshama, okay, another word for soul, such that it would be dependent upon the neshama as the neshama is dependent on the physical body. Rather, it is from Hashem, from heaven. Therefore, when the body's material, which is composed of the physical elements, decomposes, and the neshama ceases to exist, for the neshama only exists with the body and is dependent on the body for all of its activities, this form will not be cut off, since it is not dependent on the neshama for its activities. Rather, the nefesh, knows and understands the non-physical concepts and knows the creator of everything and lasts forever and ever. This is what Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, was referring to when he said in Koheles, in Ecclesiastes, the dust will return to the earth where it was, and the ruach will return to God who granted it. So, loosely speaking, if you're going to make a lineup of all these three things, so the nefesh is this non-physical component of man that can know non-physical ideas and can have knowledge of God and that lasts beyond death. That's the nefesh in the Rambam's lingo. The toar is the physical body. Okay, your mouth, nose, cheeks. Okay, that is that's your physical body. There is another soul, which is also called nefesh, that is found in all living things whereby we eat, drink, reproduce, feel, and muse. That is what we'll call, let's say, like the biological soul. That's something that animals also have. And then there's the neshama, which is somehow connected to like your physical body that ceases when your physical body dies. Okay. So again, I'm not saying this is a one-to-one correlation, but loosely speaking, what Marcus Aurelius is calling the flesh loosely corresponds to what the Rambam is calling the toar and the nefesh that animates all living things. The nefesh, which is eternal and grasps ideas, very loosely speaking, correlates to the command center, even though Marcus Aurelius is not saying that this is the part through which you know things. And then the neshama is like this life force thing that is dependent on the physical body, right? Your ability to breathe is dependent on your lungs pumping in air in and out. And there's some sort of interdependency. And then as soon as you die, that ruah, that neshama like ceases. That's loosely correlated to like what Marcus Aurelius is referring to as the spirit or the breath. Now, Lauren, I realize now that I got to the end of this, I kind of accidentally hijacked your question and just used it as an excuse to like read this Rambam, which I wanted to read at some point anyway. So let me know if I did not address your question adequately.
Yeah, it's all good. It's good. This
Okay.
was a good review. But I guess like I don't know if this is going off topic, but in terms of like the form and the matter, does man have three parts? Like it's like the
Yes,
manness, is that the spirit?
It's very difficult because man is a rational animal, right? You're not pure rationality, you're not pure animality. There is a soul of you insofar as you're an animal. Okay, that's like that the same thing that the dog's dogness. There's something like that in the human being, and then there's the soul, the nefesh, which is like having to do with your knowledge, which is somehow related to your body. That's the part that's very confusing to me, which we're not going to get into right now.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's
Okay.
clears it up.
So here's what we're gonna do. And let's just do a little bit of methodology really quickly. Okay. My Tehillim students will be familiar with this, but I'm gonna read it through Adler. Okay, so there's this great book by Mortimer Adler, called How to Read a Book. Oh, no, that's not where we want to go to. How to Read a Book. Wait, no. No, it's on Adler. How to Read a Book. And in it, he has the 4 questions you should ask of every book or every really non-fiction text, okay? What is the book about as a whole? You must try to discover the leading theme of this book, how the author develops this theme in an orderly way by subdividing it into its essential subordinate themes or topics. Question 2, what is being said in detail and how? You must try to discover the main ideas, assertions, and arguments that constitute the author's particular message. Question 3, is the book true in whole or in part? You must make up your own mind. Knowing the author's mind is not enough. And question 4, what of it? Why does the author think it is important to know these things? Is it important to you to know them? What else follows? What is further implied or suggested? So I'm going to suggest that what we do is prioritize what is this entry about as a whole. So I want to try to figure out what is the main idea. Okay. I also want to prioritize who cares, what of it, how does this affect us? Because the reason why we're learning this is to apply to our lives. And I don't want to say that these two are less important, but if we don't understand every single thing that Marcus Aurelius says or answer every one of our questions, I can live with myself, and we obviously have to know whether this is true in whole or in part. Okay. But I want to prioritize what is the main idea and like what of it. Okay. So that's going to be our mission right now. Okay. So let's take a moment. Also while I turn on the oven to make dinner, to think about this, and then I'll open the floor to whoever thinks they have a theory about either what do you think his main idea is or what's your main takeaway. Okay, let's take 1 minute. I'll be right back. Okay. Lauren, I think, is your hand held up from before, or is this a new hand raise? Okay. David or Terrell, you're up.
Yeah, okay. So what I'm seeing here is he's outlining a lot of different things about like a lot of natural physical tendencies or tendencies of a physical body. And I think through his elaboration on that, what seems to me is that he's taking as a strategy of how to work, given that he's human, but then also these are not the ideal.
Okay.
That he's acknowledging his drives and things that he naturally goes for and desires, and recognizes exactly what they are for being what they are. And then with that knowledge, saying these are not important and I shall go to what is important.
Okay. Okay. So the main idea is recognizing what it is, what he is as a human, and what each of his parts is and ought to be, and then following those implications to their practical end. Okay, so in other words, flesh is a network of nerves, veins, and arteries. Okay, what is its job? And I don't know what they thought the purpose of the nerves, veins, and arteries was, by the way. I know they were aware of it because like they dissected, they cut open animals and they probably saw like human guts and stuff. I don't know what they thought it was, but like it's serving some function. It keeps that going, and like my choices don't really impinge on that, in terms of like I'm not pumping my own blood, right? Like it's an automated process. And breath is something that is just going to happen throughout my lifetime, and it's not the same breath, and like I can't control it. But the command center should be in command. That's what it does. It is the command center, and then that's what takes him to his puppet thing. Like, don't be a wind up symbol monkey. Yeah. Okay, that's a good framework. Okay, good. Okay, Noah.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is a different idea or if I'm nuancing it or
we'll use that.
anything.
We'll copy and paste that to whatever anyone says, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of overlap in what people say. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that the idea is to forcibly keep your head in the game around a moral impulse that you believe is true, rather than following any of the things, yes, but my, and thinking about like the rabbinic literature and Torah, like the reasons that men don't go to war, even if they're of age, like my field that I didn't plant yet, my house that I didn't finish building, my fiance or wife who I did not thoroughly wife up yet, etc. Yeah. And like those are, reasonable things. Yeah. But obviously, if you're already on the front line, you should be fully present on the front line.
Okay. So forcibly keep your and I cross out head and put command center, because the head is just your body. You should despise your head, but keep your head in the game. Especially when you're on the front lines, and tempted, or I don't know if tempted is the right word, because that implies like a desire, but like prone to falling into a mode where you're not in command and you're at the this is a phrase, right? Beck and call of your I'm going to say, I'm putting his words in your mouth, selfish impulses, whatever that is. And I think selfish impulses, we can for now assume that that's what we were talking about for the last 3 sessions, like all those like antisocial impulses there. Yeah. Okay, so you're taking this as like this really is a pep talk, right? You're, and not that David is saying it's not, but like the way David expressed the idea was this is like almost like a meditation on self-conception. And the way I'm hearing you say it, Noah, is that like, no, you're on the front lines of the literal battle, or the battle of like being a human being, and like you got to like make sure that the commander's in command.
Yeah, and you have to, kind of make a decision and stick with it and accept like everything that comes with it. Like if you're fighting a battle, you might not get to have your books. Like that's not
okay, yeah, right. Follow through with it, and accept its costs. Okay, for example, you might not have your books with you, or you might be on the brink of death, or you might have limited breath. Again, he had asthma. So yeah. Okay, good. That's a good takeaway. Yeah, Michael.
The obligatory. I don't know how different this is from what they said.
Yeah.
I think this is definitely similar to David, that he's telling us that yes, you have these three parts to you, but only one of them is worth like identifying yourself as, like saying I am my etc. my command center. He's saying, and he's saying then that you shouldn't and I think that's what he's saying when he's saying you should view yourself as elderly. Like an elderly person only really has, of these three, their command center in theory fully intact. And so he's telling you, view yourself as elderly as far as you recognize only my command center is my essence, really.
Right. Okay. This is what I thought the main idea was. Okay. And again, I haven't developed it fully, but we talked about this a lot last time, but it is very tempting to identify with your body, right? Like what happens when if someone punches you, you don't say, why did you do that to my body? You say, why did you do that to me? You identify with your body, or if you get wounded in battle, you say, I got injured, and you're treating your body as you. And same thing with your, again, I don't exactly know how they view the breath, but with your continued, biological life, let's say, right? So you view that as you. And he's saying, yeah, these are related to you, but they're not the true you. The true you is your command center. And the first step in actually gaining control of that is to identify what is the real you. And if you don't identify that, then you're going to be a slave to these other things, or you're going to be, or you're going to, again, if you think that the main part of the car is the paint coat instead of the engine, then you're going to freak out when you get it scratched or something like that. It's going to, you can't really own and manage a car if you've misidentified what the essence of it is. So same thing, you can't really do that with your life if you've misidentified what is you. Yeah. All right. That's the direction I'm taking. Again, this is not fully developed, but the goal this time is to just get everything out on the table. And then next time we'll come back and try to see how the whole argument comes together. Yeah. Reza?
I really like what Michael said. So my perspective is, so with the knowledge of his old age and his illness, he has recognized that his command center or his higher element is the best guide he has. So I'm wondering about the distinction between his identity and the thing that he's looking for to guide him.
Okay.
Or if those are intertwined. So if it's he thinks of that as himself, or he's seeing the command center as the most worthwhile path to follow, rather than following whatever his body's requiring of him, or whatever his spirit or emotional state or that is requiring of him. He's found a path, rather than the differentiation between identity and path.
Okay, you said something really good, and I just missed it. You said,
okay,
with his age of being, I mean, you don't have to say the exact words, but with his old age and being close to death, what has he recognized about his command center?
He has recognized it as the truest driving force that is most worthy of following.
Okay.
So
that's really good.
I wrote that down, and then as Michael was talking, I thought about the difference between the identity of a person, that the self-conception versus the path, if that makes sense.
Okay, that's really good. And so most worthy following, and that should dictate his path and steer him on that path. Okay. I hope everyone whose hands are raised is going to remember what they say, because I think this is a good opportunity to really quickly address Race's questions about old age and death and Shmuel's questions about old age and death. And I want to do this through the Drushos Haran. Question is, where is it? Give me 1 second to find this. So I have this article called On Aging with and Without Torah, which is very relevant here. Okay, I'll read my translation instead of pulling up the original. Okay, so there is a Mishnah in Kinim that says, Rabbi Shimon ben Akashia says, elderly, unlearned men, okay, I think the term that he uses is Amei Haaretz, okay, ignoramuses, as long as they continue to age, their da'as becomes more agitated. Okay, da'as is a word for mind or psyche. Okay, As it is stated, he removes the speech of the capable and takes away the reasoning of the elderly. But Torah elders, people who grow old with Torah, are not like that. Rather, as long as they continue to age, their das becomes, that is a typo, even more settled. As it is stated, in the aged is wisdom, and in length of days understanding. Okay, so the Ran comments on this, and he says as follows. This does not mean that as long as the Torah elders continue to age, the more their wisdom increases, for it is possible that this won't happen. Since the intellect is dependent on the physical faculties, senses, imagination, memory, all of which function through the brain, which is a physical organ, it is possible that when these men become exceedingly old and these faculties weaken, the intellect will also become weakened. Okay, so that's like what we were saying last time that Adler says about the relationship between the mind and the brain. You don't think with your brain, but you can't think without it, right? You think with your mind, your soul, and it functions through a physical brain. And if you get Alzheimer's, you're not going to be able to think. Does that mean that your soul is defective? No, it means that the physical organ that you use is defective. Okay, so rather, when the Mishnah said their da'as, their mind becomes even more settled, its meaning is as followed. In their youth, the Torah elders gave up their addictions to the pleasures of the physical world and chose the path of the good. Therefore, as they continue to age, their das, their mind, becomes more settled. This means that they become more reconciled with themselves, and their das becomes at ease with the decision of their youth. In other words, even though they decided in their youth to abandon their addictions to the pleasures of the physical world and its excesses, it is impossible that they were not occasionally drawn to them. So when you're young, you're drawn to the physical pleasures. Okay, so they did have attraction to those physical pleasures. Even though their intellect opposed this and prevented them from being seduced by the physical pleasures, it is impossible that they did not desire them to some degree. Therefore, their das, their mind, was not completely settled in their youth, for they were caught between two opposing forces. But the more they continue to age, the more these desires weaken. Their imaginative faculty, okay, this is the part that generates fantasies, sees that everything it once fantasized about in matters of the physical world was pointless, transient, and utterly finite. At that point, it is no longer necessary for their intellect to oppose the imaginative faculty and to dissent. In other words, as you age and you see that these things that you glorified in your youth in the physical world are transient and futile and pointless, you don't have to wage war with yourself in order to oppose them. Therefore, their das is settled, for they clearly see that they had chosen the good and resolved to follow it, and everything that they had forfeited in matters of the physical world was worthless, and that there was no cause for feeling anxiety over its forfeiture. The opposite befalls the unlearned elders. In their youth, they were seduced by their addictions to the pleasures of the physical world. Their das was at ease and reconciled with this, and they didn't care about their intellect's opposition. But as they continue to age, the physical world withdraws from them, and they withdraw from it. They see that everything they once desired and chose in their youth was but nothingness, vanity, and that they had only inherited falsehood. Because of this, their das is not settled with the decision of their youth. Nevertheless, since they did not learn righteousness, and they had become habituated and sunken in their bad habits, their intellect lacks the ability to turn completely away from the path which they have taken until now. Therefore, as they continue to age, they will be caught between two paths, and the path will not be theirs. Almost at the end of the excerpt here. This is what the rabbis of blessed memory intended by the expression, their das is agitated, as in the expression, a ship that is mitarefes, is agitated on the sea. This expression refers to a ship in the middle of the ocean with oppressive waves thrusting the ship from one side to the other, and its sailors are unable to guide it on a single path. Instead, the wind pushes sometimes to one side and sometimes to the opposite. Likewise, those who are seduced by their addictions to the physical pleasures of this world, as they continue to age. For in their youth, their das was settled, but in their old age, their das is agitated. Okay, so I want to share an example of this. So on yesterday, I met up with an acquaintance of mine from 24 years ago. Okay, when I was not Jewish and I was in public school. This was someone who I was a classmate of in 10th grade, and I did not like her. She was very she intentionally annoyed me because I think she had this crush on me or whatever. And I really didn't like her. And we parted ways. And then at some point in the 2010s, we became connected through Facebook, and we started becoming actual friends. And so this is the first time that we actually met up with each other since 2000. Okay. So we were having this very interesting discussion of what different paths our lives have taken. And obviously I can't say this idea that I just read, but the interesting thing is her profession. I don't know exactly what you call it. She's one of these people who injects Botox and does cosmetic surgery and stuff like that. And her whole life revolves around like, appearances, and like physical appearances. In fact, I wanted to write a post about this, and I couldn't use the picture that she took of us because she used a filter, and I don't look like myself, and I'm like, oh, like this is not me. But she was using a filter on herself. It's the first time I've ever had a picture of myself as a filter. My point, though, is that one of the things I really wanted to talk about, but I can't like say this because it's gonna like, I can't like criticize someone's whole lifestyle. Is like, you're devoting your whole life to physical appearances, and I can tell you've gotten all these like beauty treatments and stuff, and as you get older and older, it's just going to get worse, like your whole career and your whole industry is fighting against aging, and you invested your entire self in this growing up and in your whole career, and it's just going to be pried away from your wrinkly hands, as you get older. Whereas like, thank God, like the life that I'm living is connected to knowledge and to seeking, it's built around the command center. And if anything, I'm going to be getting more and more adept at this, as I gain more knowledge. And it's a sad fate that, again, he's saying the mission is saying non-Torah elders, like the older you get, the more you're attached to the physical world in your youth. It's going to be easy sailing when you're young because you're just going to give into all your pleasures. But as you age, then you're going to be forced to like give that up and not be engaged in it. And you're not going to have anything you built up in its place. And it's going to be miserable, So whereas if you devote your life to your mind or your command center or to knowledge, then yeah, you can get, brain defects and stuff like that. You can't control that, but your life is only going to continue to have an upward trajectory. So this is what I'm kind of riffing off of what Reza was saying, but like, yeah, as he's getting close to death, he's recognizing that his command center is the truest driving force and the most worthy of following, and that's setting up his whole path. And that's going to steer him in that way. Okay, now I know there are a lot of people with their hands raised. Anyone want to just like add to this idea? Because this is very connected to what Michael was saying, and this was the approach I was going to take. So I wanted to say anyway. But anyone want to chime in here?
Yeah, I want to say something like this.
Go ahead.
I think we just didn't say this word, but the flesh and the spirit are like fragile.
Yeah. I think the closest thing we get to it is never constant.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of like I don't know, like transitory, like not reliable, not the same, is I think part of the way that he's expressing this idea.
Yeah, correct. That's a good point. Yeah, and I assume that's also just, he doesn't even have to say that about the flesh, because I think that's what he's saying is like it's it's just like this physical stuff. Yeah. Anyone else want to add something to this?
Yeah, I was thinking also that like I feel like the command center is the one that you have the most control over.
Yeah.
Because like especially like his last sentence at the end where he says like put an end to complaining about your present fate and shrinking from the future. I feel like if you focus a lot on the flesh and spirit, you're just going to be kind of like always like focusing on these things, but ultimately those things are out of your control. But what's the thing that you can control the most is the command center, and then you'll kind of get the most satisfaction in life, I guess. Okay,
that's a great point. Okay, that I did not see. That really addresses this. So Lauren's pointing out that the last sentence follows from embracing your command center as the real you. You can spend your life complaining about what happens to your physical self, but you can't control that. And all you can control is your command center. So focus on that. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, Shmuel, you're up.
Rabbi, I wrote this down.
Okay.
Okay. So I wrote this down when you were talking about how your command center is really who you are, not how your mind is really who you are.
Yeah.
So I was just gonna say that the headless horseman would disagree with you.
Well, how does he control his horse?
That is beyond all of us.
Okay. Fair enough.
Anyways, so Marcus Aurelius is taking himself on a mindfulness session. He's moving not only his body, his flesh, veins, and arteries, but also his spirit, his breath, which in mindfulness is important to control. but it's not the whole point of the experience. So he can level his mind and truly connect to his surroundings and true sense of who he is.
That's good. Yeah, that's very very nice with the. I'm sensing a again not that these other ideas don't overlap, but like I feel like these last three ideas I wrote up here are all unified here. So in other words, hold on just a second here. So again, I find it interesting how like Shmuel is conceiving of this as like a mindfulness session. Noah characterizes this as forcibly keeping your head in the command center. I just think it's interesting, like the different vibe that we get from the different ways of implementing these things. Where he, I guess, calibrates the three parts and their relationship with each other. All right, nice. Reza?
I think an underlying theme here is the impact of writing, like the act of writing on the human mind, like the way that it reminds us of things and convinces us of things, and especially the repetitive nature. If you write something a lot like a mantra, you kind of it gets ingrained into you. And I think when someone is trying to convince themselves of something, and I was thinking of this during your story about your friend, posting on social media, when I see something about like that field of work posted on social media, I can't help but think like the writing of the post is kind of like an act of convincing oneself that is right. And I think it's a big feature of just social media in our culture today. But also, like, we are reading someone's private journal that he never wants to get shared, and who knows, like this could have been like a therapeutic practice for him that now we're analyzing, like you said at the beginning. So
yeah, it's good. I think this is, and again, this is commenting on like what Isaiah was asking about, and what David was asking about with the this is not allowed. Like, there's two things here. There's the idea, and then there's how he's making this idea part of his life. And I think that you can approach it that this is a general technique he's using, like what Reza is saying, or like I was pointing out, like using expressions of contempt, or this particular technique is suited to this particular idea here. So yeah, it's good. Yeah, Noah.
So I wanted to comment on the age thing a little bit, especially because I think one of the other translations like used a form of the word ego, and that kind of like stuck with me. But like the first thing I thought of was an experience I had in like a totally secular environment where the elders in the group were telling us like, it's not your responsibility to, put yourself on the line in any way. Like, we're old, we'll go to protests, we'll chain ourselves to trees, we'll get arrested. You stay in school, get involved in local politics, et cetera, et cetera. Like, that's what you have to do. That's what's best for the system. Because if I get taken out right now, it's not as big of a deal if the young people who still have, all of their flesh and bones to use towards something and their minds to cultivate, et cetera, which was really profound for me. But then like also in like some matchmaking group, someone commented on like men having children after a certain age being a purely egotistical thing because they won't be around to raise them. And I was just like, yeah. So like, is Marcus Aurelius at the point where he's saying like, bro, stop thinking about more kids, like just don't like no one's gonna believe you, just do your job. Like, so I feel like it's kind of like a what's best for the system, even if it's uncomfortable for you pep talk again.
Okay, yeah, so that's a really good point. So different so yeah, I'm gonna kind of frame this from the first entry. Even though we're all human beings and are essentially the same, there is a difference between the use of a youth for the system and the use of an old man. And perhaps he's talking to himself from that perspective. Yeah, I'll just leave it. I think the example that you gave is good. I want to think more about the implications here, because again, he also was the emperor, so like, and he also was leading people into battle, so I don't exactly know what the implications are. Okay, let's go with SD. Let's go with everyone whose hands are raised now, and I do want to end by 9:30. So yeah, SD, go ahead.
So I was hearing this similar to the last entry where he was preparing himself and anticipating the things that he was going to encounter in his day
Yeah.
that are challenges for him, and he was trying to have his clear mindset.
Yeah.
And I was reading this the same way, that he was recognizing that within himself there's the flesh and the spirit that would enslave his command center.
Mhm,
And
right.
I wouldn't say the command center is the only thing you can control. The command center is the control. And he's identifying himself as his control, that those other things want to steer him into other, impulses. Like he knows that those impulses are there. He knows he's going to encounter them during the day. And he's saying, those are not me. Me is the one that can choose, and I can determine my fate and my future instead of being compelled by those other things, similar to the people that he would have encountered in the day that might make him do something he doesn't want. This is me, and I can do this. And that's how I was reading it.
Okay, that's a really good connection between the two. So he's identifying himself as his control and warning himself that the flesh and spirit might seize control. The me is the one who can control what I do, and if I allow that command center to be hijacked by the body, then I'm going to end up acting like all those people in Meditations 2:1 who are unfortunate.
Right, and that he can't complain about his fate if he does that, because he didn't choose it. He allowed himself to be knocked around. But if he chooses, that's him, and then he can also determine his future.
Yeah, because it is up to him. Okay, so that's an interesting spin on the last part also, because it's saying like, you can't complain about what you do to and with yourself, right? You're doing it. So yeah, that's been really well from before.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, good. Leslie.
Rabbi, with all due respect, I think that we're missing the point about forgetting your books.
Yeah.
I think the point of forgetting your books, and don't let it upset you, that's not allowed indeed as one at the point of death. Books represent the fantasy of immortality. Because once you write down your ideas, they last far more than your skin and bones. They're going to be around forever. So forget your books, meaning that all those people that came before us and wrote down their wonderful ideas, we profited from it. But now all we have is, of course, our spirit and our command center, which we can chop the ideas for. But I think that by, putting down forget your books and don't let it upset you, he is telling you that you should forget the idea of immortality, because that's what the books represent.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, that actually reminds me of one of the last lines of Koheles. Not the exact same thing, but it reminds me of a similar urging at the end when Koheles says in 12, 5, 8 and 9. Hava havalim Koheles. Hakol Havel, so that's the restatement of the initial thesis. Futilities, or mere breath, said Koheles. Everything is mere breath or transient or futile. Sorry, I'm reading the wrong pasuk. Oh yeah. V'yoser mehema b'nihi zaher. More than these, my son, be careful. Asos sfarim harbe ein kates. There's no end to the making of many books. V'lahag harbe yagias basar. And the exertion of flesh. Excessive study is an exertion of flesh. In other words, like there is an immortality fantasy that could get caught up in books, even though books are a means of getting ideas and improving your command center. But like, don't get caught up in that also. All right, good. Michael, last one for the night.
I remember I asked about what the difference is between the transience of his breath and spirit, and presumably his flesh, and then also from his command center, because he's now like elderly.
Yeah.
And I think what we've said allows us to answer that, especially based on the Ron you brought, that with the flesh and the spirit, as it's getting older, it's continuing to like decompose and it's losing its functionality. Whereas he's showing himself that even when he's old, his command center is still fully operational. So even though, like, yes, all of these things are transient, and he can't control that, like all these things are going to go away, I guess maybe not the command center. I don't know what he holds about that, but regardless, like his control over it eventually will be. And what he's saying is because that's going to stay with you even when you're older, that shows that it's more like essential to you.
Okay, so it shows that the command center is more essential to you and is a better investment. Investment. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so this was a good exploration, and I think there is. I think we did. Even though I haven't restated it yet, I think we did a good job of getting the main idea. Let me just attempt to like state what I'm getting from this entire discussion here. So what we have here is Marcus Aurelius engaging in a pep talk or a meditation or a slapping himself in the face to remind himself what is the real me and what is not. What is something that is an investment in a good path or a good investment, even in old age, and what is an investment in something that's just going to like dwindle and deteriorate and be gone, and what can I do to avoid falling into the traps that I outlined in the previous chapter of being unsocial and obsequious and all those other negative qualities. And the answer is very clear, which is the command center. And if you do that and take responsibility for that and, use that to make your decisions, so that's the best aspect of you. That is the real you. And it's not going to, you're not going to have anything to complain about because it's all you. If your body is you, then you can complain about a lot of stuff that happens to your body because it's out of your control. But if the command center is you, then you're the one who's steering things, and it's all you. That's my on the spur of the moment attempt to like summarize everything. Okay, so I don't really have time right now. I don't want to go through and see if we answered all of our questions. I think what we'll do is like this. Let's think about this. If you have other questions on this that you want to take up, then text me or email me. I think this is good. I'm ready to move on to the next one next time. I think this is a useful discussion. Maybe what we'll do is we'll start next time by recapping this in case there are, whenever we review stuff, then there are new ideas that come up. And so we'll review it and recap it. And then let's plan to move on to the next chapter. Okay. All right. Thanks for coming. This is a fun discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.